Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 114. I'm Enigmius, and today we're continuing with the MineOrb hover miner that we started a few episodes ago. We're making progress with every episode because it's not a very large ship, but we're still spending a little bit of time getting the aesthetic maybe a little bit more involved than the sled that we had originally built for our mining tests. And also learning as we go about some of the changes that are coming with the game for the Alpha 6 release that's just around the corner, as far as I know. And also learning about some of the things that have been in the game for a long time that we just haven't had an opportunity to mess around with. In this case, specifically the drill turrets, and a viewer tip pointing out that you can only use them manually. You can't have them all sort of set up and they mine automatically for you. You pick a turret that you want to use and you use that to mine, and the advantage that it has over the fixed drills is that you can reach things from a distance, you can reach things with precision. So if you finish mining out an area and you find you've got bits and blobs here and there that you kind of missed with the static drills, you've got the drill turret that you can use to clean it up and get everything that you want. So with that in mind, we don't need 4 of these drill turrets on the front of the ship, but I could justify having 2. So we're going to adjust the front end so that it supports 2 drill turrets and then make everything else sort of fit together and work. Right now, we're finishing off the placement, as you can see, of the hover engines. We started this in the last episode with our drone. We could flip it upside down right on the ground and kind of tuck a few hover engines underneath to get the ship kind of started with this whole process of being able to lift off the ground. But we don't have everything that we need in order to make this work properly. We don't have all of the thrusters that we need, so the ship likes to want to tilt around and just do strange things while it's waiting for us to finish putting all the thrusters and such in place. You saw me at the very beginning of the video putting in the RCS units. We're starting with, I think the total was 30 is what I went with at the very beginning, and of course there's room to add more if I decide that we want more, but preliminary testing suggested that 30 would be adequate for this thing to be able to spin around and do everything that I want it to do. So we'll go with that. My approach to the hover engines is just stick them on until you don't feel like sticking them on anymore. That's how I come to the number that I put in place for any particular hover vessel build. The only reason why I would use fewer, I guess, specifically go out of my way to use fewer, is if I had so many that it was causing power issues, it was consuming too much fuel. See, I don't mind if it's drawing too much power if we've got plenty of room to add more generators. Is if something is consuming too much fuel, that's kind of a pain, because then you have to get more fuel and spend more time getting that fuel than you would if you had a slightly more efficient vessel. So in this case, I haven't encountered any difficulties on either front, either with power generation or with fuel consumption. So we're just going to stick with the original plan. I've been talking about this whole thing with the 2x2 holes all over the ship that we've specifically left open, because if we were to try and close them in just using the hardened steel blocks and try and create this seamless pseudo-round sort of chassis, it would have probably ended up looking pretty ick. The smaller the ship, the harder it is to make the exposed faces and all the weird shapes fit in a way that you don't necessarily mind. So we took advantage of the situation. We needed to have openings for the thrusters anyways, so we're using the openings that would have been the most difficult to fill in a way that I would be happy with. And the end result is we've got plenty of thrusters, and we don't have to come up with lame excuses for why we didn't fill in those holes with structural elements instead of functional ones. Now, another viewer tip, I think possibly from the same person who pointed out the issue with the drill turrets, is with Alpha 6 that's coming out fairly soon, there are going to be certain components on the ship that produce radiation. If you're standing too close to them, you get radiation poisoning or you take damage or something to that effect. I don't know the specific radiation mechanic. I just know that there will be certain components that will be producing radiation, and if you get too close to them, it's bad. So there's going to be some changes to what you're seeing now in terms of the layout of the interior. Right now we've got fuel tanks, generators, and thrusters all pretty close to the cockpit. So we're going to be making a few adjustments just to accommodate the safety of the pilot. before this whole thing is said and done. If you're looking at it now and feeling concerned, don't worry about it. We'll get it sorted. It didn't really take all that long to get from the basic concept in my head to this point here. But what ended up happening is I recorded a whole bunch of stuff. Several hours worth of footage of the build process up to about this point here. And then I just been editing it together as I have an opportunity and releasing it in, relatively short videos. 10 to 15 minutes has always been the goal. The end result is we get to a certain point and we've been making progress despite some of the things that we've learned along the way. And then after this point is this sort of mad dash to implement all the changes that we want to make based on feedback, new information, and even just things that we've decided that we're not really happy with, like me placing that docking pad in the wrong spot. I've fixed it, don't worry. So here is an example of what happens. This is the newest footage that we've offered in some time of the build. I've removed the 4 drill turrets. I've placed 2 more in the center, right down that center line on the vertical. And now it's a function of making sure they're in a good spot. And right, you can see they're not. They're too far forward. They're actually ahead of the static drills, which is no bueno. We don't want that. We want the drills themselves to be the farthest point forward on the ship so that they can contact material and do what they're supposed to do. Not a problem. Again, it's not a large ship. It doesn't take long to make adjustments. So we just kind of have to consider in terms of where we need to put the turrets, what we need around the turrets, what we still need on the front of the ship. And in this case, we've gone through so far back that we've reached the RCS units in the lower deck of the ship. It's a lot easier in this case to remove the RCS units and then go back around later and replace them in a way that won't be in the way than it is to insist that we have to leave them there because they're a component that's important for the ship. We can move functional components if we have to in order to make room for other functional components that don't give us the same liberty in terms of their placement. We have to have these drills observing certain considerations as we're placing them. It's not a specific hard and fast rule exactly where they have to go, but there are more restrictions in placing the drills than it is in placing the RCS. So you see, we had to move the cockpit, so we did that. I haven't actually tested the drills to see how their position now is going to impact their range of motion and what we can actually expect to hit with the drill turrets, but I will be doing that very, very soon, and it'll be something that is on the list of things to test before we finalize the design and offer the blueprint. There's no point having these drills on the front of the ship in the position they're in if they can't really hit much of anything. That having been said, the reason why I put 2 onto the ship on the front is because between the depression and the elevation and the limitations of where they can move, this was kind of a lazy way of making sure that no matter where you were, as long as the ship was facing in the general direction of the things that you wanted to continue mining, you would be able to do that with one or both of the turrets, and you would have the flexibility to choose which one as opposed to jiggling the ship around. And sometimes some of the holes that I've made in the process of mining have been pretty uneven and a little bit difficult to find a stable position to leave a ship. So we've got that option. Was it that important? No. No, it wasn't that important at all, but we did it anyways. So now we've added thrusters to replace the ones that we took off, and we actually ended up with more thrusters than we had originally, which is always kind of nice, a nice little bonus, especially when we were talking about you mine down to a certain point. It's nice to be able to just reverse out. As soon as you start turning the ship, especially in really narrow corridors, the camera starts doing some really funny things. So we've got a number of different options available to us in terms of how we are able to move the ship around and which directions we're able to move, and move well, I guess is the word that comes to mind, as opposed to sluggishly or poorly. We've got a ship here that is not intended for use in combat, but I still always have this part of my brain that says there's no harm in bulking up the front end a little bit. If you do find yourself in a bad spot, you've got one area of the ship that you can swivel towards danger while you're waiting for the turrets to kick in and do their job. We don't have any turrets, common turrets on the ship yet, but we will before it's done. It doesn't really make sense to me, even though it's not intended for a combat role, to have any kind of ship that is defenseless because we just decided not to put any guns on it. I'm not counting on the drill turrets or anything else for defensive capabilities, because I don't really think that's why they were made. So we're going to probably have miniguns on this ship, with the option, I think, to swap over to cannons. I think you can have cannon turrets on hover vessels, if I'm not mistaken, and those things can be a lot of fun as long as you're not trying to salvage the terrain in the areas where you're hitting, because they tend to dig fairly substantial holes. Now we've got the extra bulk that I was talking about, and then we've got just some strange curves and angles coming together, and I'm just kind of, instead of trying to control it and make it you know, smooth and all elegant and all that, I'm kind of embracing that there's going to be some funky angles on the front of the vessel relative to the other areas on the ship, the sides, the back, definitely the underside, and even the top, where it's going to be a little bit more uniform, and we'll have slightly less opportunity to make things work the way that we want them to. So this is kind of where it's sitting now. The next episode is going to pick up where we left off. And again, like I say, we've just got some interior work to do. We're going to move some things around. The structure is almost complete. And then once we get everything set up on the inside the way we want it, the structure is fully complete. We've got turrets for defense. Then we'll do the painting, the texturing, the testing, and the blueprinting. And that'll be where it is. So if you want to be notified about the next episode and future episodes, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel and or follow me on social media. Links for social media are in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.